Hey, good morning, guys. Welcome back to the Rod Shop. Today we're going to be working on finishing up the trim work and the accent wraps on this G2 carbon fiber handle assembly with the hood mounted foregrip, which can be a pain, so stick around. Okay, last time we were working on these C6O2 rods, I had built the handles, and then in the static load test video, I kind of teased a little bit about the accent trim wraps here. So I'm going to show you how I do this. Now, the rod we're going to be working on today is rod number 3 in this set of rods I'm building for a client. This is rod number 2 that is complete. And you can see that this handle assembly is finished and that I've got my epoxy ramp and my trim and accent bands in here and the hook keeper mounted. And then there is epoxy work for my labels. So what we'll do today is I'm going to take this apart, show you how I get my layout done, and we're going to do some wrapping. So let's get going. First thing you're going to want to do is you have to get this hood mounted foregrip out of the way, because the work that we need to do today is underneath where this hood rests. And if you put a reel in it, and we're going to use the guide alignment tool as a reel for right now, then you can see how when you have a reel mounted, you don't really see the epoxy ramp so much, but you have trim, and then you have an accent band, and then trim, and then you have a hook, and then you have your hook keeper on the underside. So here we go. I'm going to put this one away, and then we'll get started on rod number 3. So this one's in the rack again with the completed rods. Now, first thing I want to do is my layout. So I've got my rod mounted up in my power wrapper here just to hold it in place. I'm going to take the hook of it. I'm going to take the hood loose and slide it out of the way. Now, I did my layout and I built the first 2 exactly like this. I want this third one to match in the trim, so when you stand them up there beside each other, it looks perfect. It looks like store-bought rods, even though these are super high-end custom rods. I mean, these are the $600 plus rods at the moment. So first thing we're going to do is layout. So I've got my pencil. What I have here is a bit of a plan of where everything's going to go. So I'm using just my millimeter scale here. What I have done here with my layout is from the end of the reel seat, which is what this cryptic mark is here, I'm going to go 20 millimeters to where I'm going to put my 2-turn silver trim band in. So what I'll do is I'm just going to measure here, and I'm going to mark on a blank with my pencil at 20 millimeters. That is where I'll do a 2-turn inlay. Now, at the end of my red, it's 25 millimeters, so I'm going to mark that. And then the beginning of my silver wrap here for my hook keeper is 60, which is here. And then the end of my epoxy where I'm going to put my labels, I need a flat surface, and this is an X-ray blank, so it's got the ribs on it, and you cannot put a label directly on this. You need a thin coat of epoxy, and I'll show you guys how I do that in a little bit. So we want to go 130 millimeters, and instead of marking it, I'm just going to put a little bit of a tape with a flag folded on the end of it, so as we do the final epoxy in here, I can just peel the tape off and have a really clean edge to my epoxy. So I'm going to go to 130. And that will be the end of my epoxy. So I'm going to wrap it nice and neat around it. And then what I'll do Then what I do is I just fold the end over at an angle so I get a flag. So as we're turning later, once we have the epoxy on, I'll just be able to grab the flag, peel it off slowly while it's in the dryer, take a paper towel with some alcohol on it, and just clean up the edge. Now the next thing we need to worry about is this hood and foregrip is up here flopping around, and we really don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this stand away a little further, and then I'll lock it down in the stand. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to secure the hood and the foregrip here. So what I'll do, I'm just going to take some 1/2-inch masking tape, and to protect the blank from scratches, I'm just going to cover it with 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to take my hood and foregrip and I'm going to secure it so this won't scratch the blank now, and I don't want the hood and foregrip flopping around, so I'm going to tape it down with 1/2 inch masking tape. You need to tape this down pretty good because this is going to turn for hours and hours, because we've got at least 3 epoxies sessions coming up before we're ready to turn this loose. Now this will slide back over your epoxy ramp. It'll slide over your hook keeper. You don't have to worry about it. So now that this is secure, we can start with the wrapping. So let's get set up for wrapping some stuff here. We already have the layout. My hook keeper, I'm going to set it back here out of the way. Pencil. This tape we're done with. My carriage that I like for this kind of wrapping. I'm going to take the red metallic 909, or I guess, yeah, 909 Fuji. Now this metallic thread, the thing about the metallic stuff that gets a little bit wonky sometimes is it's actually a nylon thread with a coating on it. The coating is the metallic part. So you have to watch your tension, especially in this type of carriage where I'm putting tension directly on the thread itself. Because too much tension and you'll peel some of that coating off. And if you're not careful, when you're finishing your wraps, you're going to have the white thread underneath exposed. So we got that. And the only other thing we need to do is we need to get set up on the bottom of the blank for our 2-turn silver metallic inlay. So I'm just going to pull a piece off here, clip it. Better tie the metallic down because it will unspool itself very easily off of these thread spools because it is stiff and doesn't like being going around like that. So, all right, that's out of the way. We need to get set up for our inlay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to tape this down to the bottom of the blank. I'm going to tape it up here for now. There's plenty of thread for an inlay. And now I'm going to get set up for the red wrap, which is the majority of the wrap on this rod. So we are pinning it down to the blank. I'm going to put it in wrap mode. Get my wrapper in wrap mode. Got the right pedal down here. Got too many pedals on the floor. My varnishing tool and a pick. Okay. So let's start our wrap. We'll come all the way to the reel seat. I'm going to pull that accent down. That have a little slack so I can pull it down tight. Alright, so cross over. And then we're going to start packing these threads because we really need to start this wrap off correctly. Get it packed in there nice and tight. Thread just jumped. Let's pack this in here. I got about 5 turns over my starting wrap. So I'm going to take this loose. And we're going to nip it off out of the way. And we'll continue our wrap. This is nice and straight. Keeping that metallic tight because it wants to jump over these ribs in the X-ray blank sometimes. You got to take your time, get this right to start with. And while I'm doing this, I just want to let you guys know that I appreciate you watching. And the subscribers, or you guys are just piling in here. But if you're getting something out of these videos, there is a button right down here somewhere that says join. And what that is a channel membership. It costs you $5 a month. It helps support all of the upgrades that I've made in this rod shop. We have new cameras running today. Hopefully it makes a difference, trying to get some really good up close stuff for you guys. You can see exactly what I see. I know it's difficult in a YouTube video, especially something this detailed, to really see what's going on, but I try my best. Also with the channel membership, you get access to Zoom rod building classes. We've already had our first one. Got the bugs worked out. It was pretty exciting. We had a few of us subscribers in, and a couple people dropping in for just a bit, just to say hi. But a few guys were actually working, building rods as we were doing the class. And that's what the intent is, for us to, I'll be in here working on a rod, and we will, I'll be able to answer specific questions, show you how to solve a problem. But being that one-on-one conversation is just it's more of a personal connection than just, me showing you in a video and you guys watching it. So I really like the personal interaction. I enjoy teaching. Obviously this is not a money-making adventure. That's for sure, because we have like I said, we have new cameras today, and we have new microphones. Hopefully that gets the sound a little better and can override that air conditioning noise in the background. Because it's Florida, it's summertime, it's going to be heat index in the 110s today, which is one of the reasons I'm not fishing. I'm in here working with this stuff. So, all right, we're working our way out to the 20 millimeter mark here. So let's work on out that way. Still got a little gap there. You got to be careful. Keep burnishing it back tight. Like I said, on a slick blank, you don't have to spend this much time because the thread actually piles up like it should. But as it crosses over these ribs, and I think you can probably see the ribs on camera today, it has a tendency to jump and throw a gap in there on you. So you just take your time, 4 or 5 wraps, tighten it back up again. Just keep an eye on it. Okay, now we're out. One more turn, we're going to be on our 20 millimeter mark. which is right there. Okay, now what we're going to do, I'm going to unpin this silver. I'm going to clip it off back here in the back. I'm going to pull it just a bit to pull that little tag in under, and it's gone now. So on the bottom, we're going to make a switch. So what I'll do, I'm going to hold the silver accent piece down on the red. I'm going to pull it out, holding tension on that silver that I just let go by accident. There we go. I've got the red is now pinned down by the silver. I'm going to take this piece of tape here and I'm going to pin the red out of the way for a second. And I've slid my carriage down. Now I'm just going to do 2 hand wraps with the silver. It looks like a single wrap, but this I like doing 2 because it's more defined against the red. So 1 more with the silver up tight. I'm going to turn just to make sure. I know that looks like I put a 3rd one in, but we'll back that off. I just want to get the gaps out. Again, I'm holding tension with my left hand on the silver. Getting that wrap nice and tight and straight. I'm going to back up to the bottom again, and this is where I'm going to switch over. Now I'm going to take the red, which is now held down by the silver, and I'm going to cross over it. I'm crossing the silver with the red, same spot, bottom of the blank. I'm going to pin it down with my finger, and I'm going to take this silver out of the way for now, and I'm going to cut the excess out of my way. Now I'm going to take my right hand, I'm going to pull my spool tension back up so that once we start wrapping with red again, we're back at the right tension. So I move my carriage back to the left. I've got tension on it, and we'll start wrapping red again. Crossing over that silver, we just want to keep it pinned down. We'll cut that end out of the way in a minute. Get that silver tightened up so now it looks like one wide silver band in there. And we're looking for a 25 millimeter mark. Which is here. We'll get a few more turns in and then we'll put a thread pull in. Alright, back on the bottom, we're going to insert a thread pull, and we're going to cut that silver. So I've got my yellow braid thread pull here. I'm going to slide it in, make a turn on it to hold it. I'm going to cut this silver out of the way. And we're going to finish out the red wrap. So continuing to pack it in. I'm going to work out just past that 25 mil mark, because as I pack it tight, I want that pencil mark covered. And if you don't get it completely covered, that pencil mark will wipe off very easily with just a rag. That's why I use pencil on these carbon fiber blanks. little more wrap and we'll cut it, pull it through. Okay. Pin it down. Clip it loose. Now I'll take a razor blade. I'm going to pull a little more tension on this long tag end. And then I'm just going to lay the blade down flat and pull the tag end back across the blade. And that's exactly what you don't want to happen. Is that just, I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to try to show it to you. See, you can see the white inside of the red, and it pulled when I tried to cut it. And fortunately, I didn't have it happen on this end. But that's what will happen to you, and you'll have that white sticking out the end of where your tag end is. So, except right there it is. So that's what I was worried about. Now, to fix that, I'm going to grab my lighter. Time for a new lighter in the rod shop. And I'm just going to touch it with the flame. Then I'll take my pick and I'll bury that in the wrap. The worst case is you take it back off and you do it again. But I think I can fix that. So that's the wrap. In a minute, we'll come back and start doing the epoxy work, because I need the tape here on my 130 millimeter got stuck to my hand. So I need to put that back in place at 130 as the end of my epoxy work. There we go. That's back in place. I'm going to work on this a little bit, and when we come back, I will have some epoxy mixed up, and I'll show you how to get this perfectly flat, ready for your labels. So don't go away. I just started mixing. I've got another 2 minutes to get this stuff mixed. At least 3 minutes of mix time. It's starting to develop some bubbles, which we'll take care of that here when we lay it out in a little aluminum pan. But it'll, we need to get the bubbles out, but first of all, we just need to get it mixed thoroughly. And I'm mixing 4 milliliters of each, just because I've got this long area that I want epoxy on for the labels. And then once I get this mixed and on, I'll let it turn in the dryer for an hour or so. And then since it's already in my power wrapper, I'll come back. After it's mostly set, it wouldn't be hard enough to fish with, or it would dent still, but I can finish with my guide wrapping. I've got the 2 titanium torzite guides, and then I have recoil guides for the rest of it. And in the next video, we'll go into those, but I want to get this laid out flat and show you how to get a perfectly flat area for your labels. It's a piece of cake with labels on slick blanks, but on these x-ray blanks, with that ribbing, it is imperative that you get flat epoxy in the areas that you want to put labels down. Otherwise, you're going to get air bubbles and pockets underneath them. And you can really see that after you put your finish coat over the labels, and it just doesn't look good. So I'm going to show you how to do that here in just about 45 seconds. All right, I've got a good mix on it, but like I said, I've got some bubbles in it. I'm going to pour it out flat in my pan here. Okay. Just wipe my stir stick off. I reuse them over and over and over again. The mixing cups I just pitch. They're too hard to get clean to use again, and if you get any kind of debris or foreign material in it, you're jeopardizing your finished epoxy work, and it's just not worth the few pennies those cups cost. Give me a brush out here, and I'll fan it out just to make sure all the bristles are going to play nice. Sometimes you have some that stick off to the side or that are longer than another one. That brush looks great. Now, I'm going to put a little bit of heat, just laying it flat in the pan. Most of the bubbles disappeared. I'm going to put just a little bit of heat on it because I want it very thin. And it'll also get rid of any additional bubbles that popped up. Now, I'll break it loose out of my power wrapper here, and the power wrapper is just a stand at this point. And I'm going to coat very heavily this blank in the entire area that I want from the reel seat to the end of the epoxy. We're going to put it on very heavy to start with, and then we're going to take most of it back off. But I just want to get every bit of this blank coated in epoxy. And you can see how these ribs just start disappearing. You might not be able to see in the video, but when you're doing it yourself, the ribs actually, if you don't have enough epoxy on it, you'll see areas like that where the epoxy is hitting just the ribs. You want to make sure you got epoxy down inside those ribs pretty heavily. Now we'll come out here and put a thin coat right up next to where I'm going to pull the tape. I'll go all the way around the blank. Because this epoxy will run up under that masking tape and won't give you a clean edge, so what you'll need to do is pull it and clean it with some alcohol and a little paper towel square as it's turning. I just want to make sure I've got it coated, and then I'm going to work my way back. Again, just heavy coat. I want to soak it into the threads. I want to get up under the reel seat. This reel seat, I did not get enough of the paste epoxy packed in there when I was putting the handle assembly together, so that may be tricky when I'm doing the epoxy ramp, but we'll see how it works. That epoxy will run in. I'm not going to build this ramp in one shot anyway, since I've got 2 more epoxy sessions on this blank to finish. I will just take my time and make sure that I don't get a big air bubble in there, because that's what will happen. Is if you have a gap underneath the reel seat and you're trying to do an epoxy ramp, sometimes you could get a big air pocket form there and you get a bubble and it looks horrible and you have to peel it off and start again. Getting close to get it completely coated. Now you notice I've got a paper towel under the blank on my power wrapper here, because what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to slowly turn it by hand, put some heat on it, and then we're going to stop it, and we're going to let all of the epoxy run to the bottom of the blank and drip off, and we're going to help it drip evenly with the brush. Now, for many years I tried just to brush longitudinal down the blank like this, and that does okay, but you always wind up with a glob where you stop with your brush, and as that turns, it's going to be a bit of a bulb in your epoxy, so your epoxy will be flat, and then you have a little bump, and then it'll be flat again. Those little bumps do not accept labels very well. They look horrible, in my opinion. I mean, some people like the bulbous look of epoxy on the guide wraps. I don't. I like it very flat. I think that's more professional, but again, that's just my opinion. Now I'm just rolling through here, and I'm looking at the reflection of the epoxy on the blank, and if you have a gap, a little pinhole or something where you don't have epoxy, it will show in that reflection. This is where you really have to take your time. Okay. I've got a good coat on it. Now, I'm going to put it in wrap mode, or I'm going to put it in dryer mode. So it'll turn it for me. Go to dry. And I'll take my heat gun. I'm not going to put a lot of heat on it, but I want an even coat of heat just to get this epoxy to run. I got a flying critter in here. Get out of there. Any flying critter you have in your rod shop will wind up in wet epoxy eventually. It's just the way it happens. So now I'm putting some even heat in the entire area that I just put epoxy on. I'm going to let it turn about 3 times as I'm doing the heat. Alright, so that epoxy should run pretty quickly. And now what I'm going to do is when I get the trigger down, I'm going to stop it. Now we wait. This is where you really have to be patient, because I can already see where I have heavy epoxy. It's running to the bottom. I don't know if I can get this camera to show you that. Hang on a second. You can see where it's just starting to drip. Now, those spots, let's see if I can do this with 2 hands. What I will do is I just look under and I grab these drops with my brush. I'm not really touching the blank. Sorry if this is a jiggly camera angle, but I'm trying to get this for you. You just want to grab it with the brush. You're not touching the blank. You're grabbing the epoxy and you're peeling it off. You see those bubbles. Hopefully you can see the bubbles still. This camera will focus on this stuff. You can see that bubble right there starting to form. And what I'll do is I'll just grab that in a minute and just pull it down the blank and pull it off. Now let me put you guys back up here where you belong. And you can see them a little bit in the light. You see the reflection of these bubbles or these drips. And I'm just peeling them off. Let them hit the paper towel. Clean my brush off. Now the reason I didn't do the hook keeper, and that pencil mark for the hook keeper is still in there somewhere. We may have to mark it again. I did clean the blank before I started this epoxy work with some alcohol, just to make sure I didn't have any little particles, dust particles on it. But the reason I didn't put the hook keeper on is I want 1 coat of epoxy under the area of the hook keeper where your weights are going to bang, or your hooks are going to drag if you've got a treble hook bait on your hook keeper. You just don't want to scratch the blank. The epoxy will protect the blank, and that 1 coat of epoxy makes a lot of difference, in my opinion. And after this coat is cured completely, we will come back and put the hook keeper on, and then another coat of epoxy. So let's dry this again. Put this in dry mode. I'm going to put a little more heat. I get a few bubbles popping up. This epoxy is now about 13 minutes old, so we've still got plenty of time on it. I'm going to stop it again. Again, trigger down, stop, and let it run. Just to see if there's any more areas that are going to drip. I don't see anything coming yet. Looks pretty good. Alright, we'll let her dry. Now, like I said, I've got about 14 minutes on this epoxy. I'm going to start working on the first layer of my epoxy ramp, which how I put the epoxy ramp in is I'm waiting for this epoxy to get close to set time. If you have it still in a mixing cup, it's going to cook off a lot faster, but since I spread it out, the heat generated by the chemical reaction of the two parts of epoxy gets dissipated more if it's laid out flat versus being piled up in a cup still, so the heat actually causes it to cook off faster. Plus I've got it pretty cool here in the rod shop. We're at about 70. It gives me a little extra working time, but it's getting close. What you want it to be, what you want to see is to be able to get a bulb of epoxy in your brush and hold it. Not quite there yet. We're getting close because I don't actually brush this epoxy on for the ramp. I'm dropping it in place from the brush. And I'm just going to do that. I'm going to do that several times. And I just add to my last drop. And you just get your timing right. And this epoxy is still a little wet. Starting to get there. Now it's running, and on this side of the blank it's got a big drip, so I'm just manipulating the drip with the very tip of my brush. Like I said, I'm not brushing it. I'm kind of dragging the very top of that drip around to fill in the gap underneath my reel seat that I wish I didn't have. This would be easier if I didn't have that, but it's starting to fill in okay. Starting to look like a ramp. I got a little bit of epoxy up on my reel seat, which we'll clean that off in a minute with a paper towel. But I'm just slowly building this epoxy ramp. Now I'm dragging it. Hopefully the overhead camera we can see that. Where I'm really not brushing. I'm not anywhere close to the blank. I'm just dragging the top of this epoxy drip around the blank as it turns. Looks like I've got that whole gap filled in now. So I picked up the drip with my brush. And I think that's got it for this first coat. I don't want to go any heavier than that now. I want to let that run and get up underneath that reel seat. Like I say, I'm concerned about an air pocket showing up. And they will show up an hour from now. Everything looks great. It's turning. You walk away from it. Go have lunch, whatever. Come back, and you got a big air pocket. So, make a paper towel. I got some epoxy on my hands, and you don't want to leave epoxy fingerprints. You can't get them off the blank. You can't get them off this carbon fiber handle assembly. You just got to be very careful. So I got my little paper towel squares here. I'm going to wet one with just a little bit of alcohol. And I have one little bit of epoxy right there at the bottom of the reel seat, so I'm going to catch it next time it comes around. I folded this paper towel so I've got a really straight edge. I'm just going to drag it along the edge of the reel seat, picking up that epoxy. I'm going to fold and do it again. Now I'm going to take a dry towel and just make sure I've got it all off. And that got it. Okay guys, that is the secret to super flat epoxy. I showed you how to do the trim band in the area where we've got the hood mounted foregrip. The hood mounted foregrip, everything's up here out of the way. Next time when we come back, we'll finish wrapping out these guides. I might throw it on the load tester. I've done a static load test on this already, but I might show you before I start wrapping. But anyway, thanks for being a subscriber. Thanks for watching. If you guys want to support this channel, hit that join button. It's $5 a month. You'll get some exclusive content that is members only. Plus, you'll have access to an unlimited number of Zoom, not like 1-on-10 rod building classes where we can interact. You can ask me questions. I can help you with whatever you're working on. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.